You're watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. From Toronto, Ontario, I'm Catherine Bullock. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. Today, a conversation with the Canadian AntiHate Network about their advocacy around anti-hate. But first, some news headlines. Paralympics committee bar Russian and Belarusian athletes. Gunman's partner and RCMP reluctant to testify on Nova Scotia mass shooting. Indigenous Muslim man denied service in TD Bank for false status card. Anti-racist groups lobby for anti-Bill 21 motion in Charlottetown, PEI. And now, the details. Russian and Belarusian Paralympic athletes are now barred from competing in the upcoming Beijing 2022 Paralympic Winter Games due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Paralympic Winter Games are set to take place in China on March 4th. The decision comes as FIFA and UEFA announced Monday that Russian teams were expelled from the 2022 World Cup and international football competitions until further notice. As the war enters its 8th day, Ukrainian authorities report 2,000 civilian casualties. This number is expected to grow as Russia launched another wave of airstrikes on civilian camps today. The families of the 22 victims killed during the Nova Scotia mass shooting in 2020 are criticizing the reluctance of the RCMP officers who were at the scene and the gunman's common law partner to testify. They argue that these testimonies are vital to the case. The RCMP officer's lawyer said testifying would bring back traumatic memories. The gunman's partner, Ms. Banfield, is facing criminal charges after she allegedly moved ammunition during the incident. She also allegedly helped the gunman clear an escape route. A women's shelter lawyer involved in the inquiry says that Ms. Banfield was assaulted on the night of the crime and should be protected from testifying. Sharif Mohammed Bamji, a Muslim man with Indigenous and East Indian roots, filed a human rights claim against TD Bank after they denied him service. The bank teller presumed his status card was fake and refused Bamji's request to open a bank account. The police were later called on him once he left the bank. Bamji says he seeks justice for himself and others who do not fit neatly into a certain identity checkbox. TD issued a public apology and said that they will conduct a review of the incident. This is the second time a Heiltsuk Nation member has been denied a bank account at a Canadian bank recently. Anti-racist groups in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, are asking their town council to pass a motion opposing Quebec's Bill 21 in an upcoming vote on March 14. The request comes after multiple municipalities such as Toronto, Halifax, and Winnipeg passed similar motions against Bill 21, a law in Quebec that prohibits people in positions of authority from wearing religious attire. Sobia Ali Faisal, Executive Director of BIPOC USHR, who sent a letter in January to Mayor Philip Brown regarding the matter, told local media sources that the city should condemn a law that targets the security and comfort of Muslim women. And that's it for the news. With the Russian invasion of Ukraine, people have quickly forgotten the crisis that hit Canada in the last few weeks, which was the Freedom Convoy occupation of Ottawa and border crossings across Canada. But there are obviously issues still of concern to Canadians. To talk to us today about his concerns, we have with us Bernie Farber from the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathy.
It's our pleasure. Now, when we were doing our reporting on the Freedom Convoy, we relied on the Canadian Anti-Hate Network's research. Can you tell us why you felt the need to do that kind of work?
Well, we already had an inkling that the leadership, the so-called leadership of the so-called truck convoy, Freedom Convoy, which is really a misnomer, were involved with the extreme right. And we had been following them from their first iteration as United We Roll. And we had some very deep concerns. We knew of Pat King for sure, and Jeremy McKenzie and others who were involved in this latest, you know, I don't even know what to call it really. I hate calling it a freedom convoy because really it was a group of racists and bigots and bullies and intimidators who came to Ottawa as a means by which to try and push their very, very extremist agenda. And so we felt that that Canadians ought to know. And we were actually, I have to tell you, a little bit late in the game. We should have been reporting even earlier. We might have been able to have had even a greater impact. But we didn't, but we were able to get the message out there. And I'm glad that folks like you and others were able to benefit from our reporting.
There were displays, anti-Semitic displays. Indigenous people were upset with their sacred symbols being misused. There was Islamophobia. What really concerned you the most? I mean, these are ongoing diseases, if I can use that word, in Canada for a very long time. But what concerns you most about this particular sort of event?
Listen, I think we have to start with the premise that every Canadian has the right to freely demonstrate, to gather, to express their opinions, and sometimes emotionally and strongly. They do not have a right to intimidate. They do not have a right to bully. They do not have a right to march down the streets, especially on Parliament Hill with racist symbols. And look, I am the child of a survivor. My late father, Max, was the sole Jewish survivor of his small town in Poland. 750 Jews. He was the only one to have survived the Holocaust. And so the symbol of the swastika is particularly, to me personally, pernicious, as it is, I think, to most Canadians. And as I was watching the events unfold on Parliament Hill, I saw not just a Nazi flag, which was horrendous, but I saw swastikas painted on Canadian flags. This was the first time in my history in working on human rights issues and anti-racism issues that I saw with such boldness people walking around with Confederate flags, with Nazi symbols. That was bad enough, Kathy. What was worse, in my view, is that nobody said anything. It was as though it was a walk in the park. And the very fact that people were silent, that people did not open a mouth, as my father used to say, that disturbed me greatly to this day.
And I mean, seeing those symbols must have been personally traumatizing. How did you cope?
Well, I cope because sadly I've been doing this job for 30 years, 35 years really. I started off, with the Canadian Jewish Congress as a director there, and worked my way up to CEO. And one of the things that we did, one of our raison d'être, was the protection and defense of the Jewish community. And so sadly, there is a small portion of Canadians, and I still believe it's very small, despite what we saw with this convoy. I still believe it's a small portion. It's allowed. It's an obnoxious portion, but there's a portion of the Canadian population that are bigots and that are racist and that are neo-Nazis. As a matter of fact, we actually have a bona fide political party here in Canada known as the Canadian Nationalist Party, which is in fact a neo-Nazi party. And they were able to get official political party status. There's a piece today in the Canadian press that explains all of this and what the Canadian government is now going to do about this. So I've sadly gotten used to seeing it, but I've never really gotten used to the trauma that it exposes in me. I've just had to fight it back. There's not much else one can do. Expose it, confront it, talk about it, get Canadians to understand, for which, on the most part, they do.
There was a private member's bill, I don't know what's happened to it, to ban the sale of symbols like the swastika. How do you feel about that? Is that the right way?
I have a lot of mixed feelings about it. Clearly, I would love to see it, but we also all have to be cognizant of our Constitution, of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And we do have anti-hate laws in this country. It's not considered against the law to actually have a swastika flag or a Confederate flag. It's how you use it. And the laws are there. What I would prefer is for authorities, police and others, to use the laws that we already have in order to do prosecutions, whatever is necessary to create what I call offensive protection for minority groups such as Muslims and Jews and people of color and Indigenous people and others. That's the way to operate, not taking law and trying to apply law. The law has to be used by authorities properly.
Muslims and Jews have possibly a difficult relationship because of what goes on in the Middle East. How do you advocate for us to work together to combat hate, which affects both of our communities?
I have been advocating on this for about 3 or 4 decades already. The idea of bringing two communities that live here in this country as Canadians together. I mean, have there been two more communities that have seen as much pain and as much attacks and as much hatred as the Jewish and Muslim communities? It wasn't all that long ago that a mosque in Quebec City was attacked by a man by the name of Alexandre Bissonnette, walked in with a long gun and murdered 6 peaceful Canadian Muslims at prayer. We saw a similar experience not here in Canada, but just south of the border in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, when a neo-Nazi gunman entered a synagogue, the Tree of Life synagogue, murdering 11 Jews. We together understand what that pain is, but we've been traveling these parallel but different paths with a huge pink elephant in the middle of that path that we fail to recognize, we don't want to talk about. And it's okay. It's okay for Canadians and Muslims to have, or Canadian Jews and Canadian Muslims to have differences of opinion, even strongly held differences of opinion. And we can discuss that passionately if we need to. But we also are two peoples with with troubles and issues that we should try and face together. Can you imagine the strength in numbers there would be if we can bring Muslim leadership and Jewish leadership here in Canada together to fight the hate that attacks both of us? And that to me would be, I think, one of the main roads that we have to go down.
A difficult road, but obviously the right road.
Indeed.
Just one last question if we have time. In 2011, Stephen Harper called Islamicism the biggest threat facing Canada. Do you think he might be changing his mind now?
I've never been able to figure out what was in the mind of Prime Minister Harper. He did so many things that I found to be way beyond the pale. But anyone who doesn't see the danger being posed by domestic extremists from the extreme right is either wearing blinders or is willfully blind. It's been recognized by CSIS, by the RCMP here in Canada, by the FBI in the United States. It is the most serious threat facing Canadians and Americans. And I would hope that even Stephen Harper today would be able to recognize that and work with us in order to try and counter it.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but if anyone wants to get involved, they can join you at the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, and we commend you and thank you for your work, and thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been watching Canadian Muslim News from Toronto. Take care, subscribe, like, and share. Stay safe. God bless.